morning, William Jackson. So, welcome for my interview, and I'm very glad to interview you or to have a talk with you. And you are very well known about producing the Medighi. So Medighi means medicinal butter. And so firstly, I want to ask you, could you tell us a little bit about your story? So your journey into the holistic medicine, please.
Yeah, sure. So, first, thanks for having me, Dr. Nida. It's a pleasure and an honor to be sitting here with you to discuss medicinal ghee in Tibetan Myanmar and all the wonderful things that it does for people. And so to talk a little bit about my own history and story as to how I got into holistic medicine and herbs for health and healing, that goes back to when I was a child, you know, 6 years old, probably. And my grandmother bringing me aside, this was in my parents' backyard down in the Baldwin Hills area. And my grandmother in the backyard bringing me over to this bush and pointing out these berries that grew on it and how they could be eaten and how, this was good for you and how you could utilize this plant that's growing right here, in the yard. I had no knowledge about. And so that kind of planted the original seed for how plants could be used for nutrition, and how these things that grow around you could be used to benefit yourself and others. And so later on in high school, that's when I began to get into teaism, green tea, chado, the tea ceremony and so forth. And then this naturally led to the use of plants and roots and herbs, not just for their healing purposes, but then also more so for their spiritual purposes, right? So that informs a large part of my background and my own history in holistic medicine, is how plants and herbs can be used effectively with clear signs, both spiritually to support our spiritual practice, but then also to support our physical, emotional, mental, and psychic well-being as well.
Mm-hmm. So then later you are involved into studying Ayurveda and TCM and also Soarikpa. Can you tell us a little bit that your journey into study of Oriental medical traditions?
So it was a question when I was about 18 years old. It was clear that I wanted to study holistic medicine. Like, this was the path that I wanted to go down, besides, writing. And so I sat there with my father, and I had already been self-studying in classical Chinese medicine, Chinese herbology, apprenticed over at Dragon Herbs, for example. And so the question came up as to, which school should I go to? Emperor's College and one of these other ones in LA, Yaosan, Samra, or the California College of Ayurveda up in Northern Cal. And so my father had actually suggested that I go up to Northern California first, travel up north and get my education in Ayurvedic medicine first before coming back down to LA to get my degree in Chinese medicine. So that's what led to me going up north to study at the CCA first. The latter part didn't happen, but the first part did. And so that's what led to me studying formally Ayurvedic medicine. And at a school where, it has a lineage that goes to, David Frawley and also, its various connections in India as well. So, is a education in formal and traditional Ayurvedic medicine. And it was quite thorough. And that's where I learned to make medicinal ghee.
Mm-hmm. But in this kind of, okay, even you studied Ayurvedic medicine and TCM, but spiritually you are more interested in Buddhism. So you are a Buddhist practitioner, and that's why probably you are also interested in Soarikpa, right, in Tibetan medicine.
Absolutely. So for myself and in my practice, spirituality cannot be divorced from holistic medicine. In other words, there is no practice of a true holistic medical practice without there being the spiritual component to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see how in other traditions, like in Chinese medicine, after Mao Zedong came to power, right? He basically tried to do that, was divorce the Taoist aspect of classical Chinese medicine from the practice itself. And so, but you don't find that in Ayurveda, in Tibetan medicine, and so on, where, when you go through the tantras, for example, the 4 Ambrosia Tantras of Tibetan medicine, it's spoken by and dictated by, the medicine Buddha and his emanations and so on. And so because of my connection to the Buddha Dharma, I was actually looking for that spiritual component, in Tibetan medicine. And that's what led to me discovering, Yutok Yonten Gompo, Nyingma, Yuton Yonten Gompo Sarma, and also Shenglong. And then this led to me discovering and finding out about yourself and the empowerments that you were giving up in Northern California at the time. So it was an immediate connection, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we all know you are Afro-American, right? Okay, so that's a beautiful photo when we met.
Yes, that's Ireland.
Yeah, that was probably our 4th or 5th times of meeting, right?
Oh yeah,
I think originally we met in San Francisco. Is that true?
Yeah, San Francisco. That was back in what, 2015, 2016?
Yeah, 2016, yeah, about 6-7 years ago. So yeah, I want to ask you, so you are Afro-American, and so you already mentioned about your grandma and so on. So I'm kind of curious to know, we know like you are super interested in Asian medicine. Sorry, you don't have Asian nose. And I'm kind of interested to know about African herbal medicine, So I know Africa is huge, by the land and also by the population, over 1 billion humans there. And the culture is so rich, spiritually, and also the natural paths and healing and so on. So have you done any kind of study or research on the, natural medical science in Africa?
Yeah, I've done research into it, and that comes by a number of ways, right? I could go back to my grandmother, giving me my first, what we may call pointing out instructions in, how plants could be used for nutrition and so forth, for health. But then also, when we're talking about, because there's the African American component, and then you got the African component. Mm-hmm. So the African American component gets into hoodoo, the African American tradition of hoodoo, with its subsidiary practices of root work, conjure, and so forth. And this is the use of herbs for both healing and for spiritual and occult practices as well, right? Because when we're talking about the African American experience of holistic or herbal healing in America, naturally, this also involves how slavery played a role in that, and how healing and well-being was able to manifest under such horrific conditions. And so under those conditions, you had 3 main categories when it came to African American healing as far as plantation medicine. And that was the doctor and the root worker and the root doctor. And so the doctor, quote unquote, was someone who was an African American, male or female, who was well versed in the healing properties of roots and herbs, right? Especially in that region or that area. And then you had the root worker, who was someone who was more well versed in the spiritual and the occult components and uses of roots and herbs. And then thirdly, you had the root doctor, which was someone who was equally well versed in both the physiological and emotional and so forth components of roots and herbs and how they can be used for healing, but then also likewise the occult and spiritual uses for them. And of course, then once we get out of that particular era of American history, when it was a slaveocracy, then we get into how roots and herbs and so forth, and the root worker, the conjure worker, and so on, acted as the doctor and the medicinal healer for the Black American, African American, freedmen and women society. Now, then we get into African medicine, which is this particular paper that you're sharing here. And more so for myself, because Africa is huge, right? It's basically a micro version of planet Earth. And so when we talk about holistic medicine, if we're going to talk about as it connects to the continent of Africa, well, then we would understand that holistic medicine and herbal healing has its origins in Africa and African people. Because if we understand that Africans are the first people on this planet, well, then naturally that would make sense that healing and holistic medicine started in Africa and with Africans as well. And so what we're seeing here and what you're sharing.
Sorry, that part is very interesting. So in this case, if we really think of the history of humanity, all humans are, generated from Africa. So in this case, that is the birthplace of a human species, and also the birthplace of like original human healing science, right? Like I believe like we have kind of instinctive, healing like wisdom or knowledge, right? Like, the cats and dogs, and they know how to do the emetic for them when their stomach is empty. And many animals, they know how to take care of themselves. So I'm really convinced that humans also originally, we had this kind of human instinctive healing knowledges. So in that case, this is, now we are talking about Ayurveda is about 4,000 years, TCM is about 4,000, ancient Egyptian medical tradition about 5,000. So
Yes.
maybe these numbers are just more like, I don't know, when the medical tradition is kind of become a little bit systematic. But for sure, before that, the healing tradition was maybe in shamanism or with the local healers and so on. So in that case, really, it makes sense that entire human, like kind of natural medical science is originated from Africa, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, Africa is the birthplace of holistic medicine. So, hence this information that we find here, and, when I reference like Yoruba land and, the work and the knowledge that I've been gaining, personally gaining, not in formal education, but in just personal learning, self-study, and so forth, from a background in Ayurveda and these various other traditions and systems. And so looking at like Yoruba medicine, for example, and it's how it comes from, or it is intimately connected to the Ifa tradition. And Ifa is a West African traditional religion. And as some of the information that you saw in that paper there, you'll see, you have the prophet Orunmila, the herbal healer, you have Eshu, you have Osanyan, Osanyan is basically, the embodiment of the holistic medicine, the holistic medical healer, or also because you have another deity that is related to the doctor, him or herself, but Osanyan is the embodiment of the roots and herbs and plants and so forth that make up the tools used in health and healing and medicine in the Yoruba tradition and Yoruba medicine. And then you also have how the various Orisha, because you have the Orisha, the Orumile, and so on. And you can look at Orisha, you could say they may be analogous to, worldly deities, right? But then also how they manifest in the body. And so Obatala, the creator and healer of humans, his primary effects are on the brain, bones, and white fluids of the body. You have Shango, the god of masculine energy, and all these various points. He controls the male reproductive system, bone marrow, life force, Herbs incorporating his virtues are plantain, saw palmetto, hibiscus, Hosho Wu, sarsaparilla, and so forth. Oshun, the goddess of feminine energy and hydrotherapy. She acts on the circulatory system, digestive organs, elimination system, and women's pubic area. Herbs consecrated to her include yellow dock, burdock, cinnamon, damiana, anise, and so forth. And then, so you have all these various other deities and how they both manifest in the body, in the mind, but then also what plants and what flora are connected to them as well. And so this all connects and how they would be tapped into and how this knowledge reflects for how it would be applied in such a tradition as Yoruba medicine or traditional Yoruba medicine, and how it cannot be divorced from the religion of and philosophies of Ifa.
So you are saying like, okay, in African tradition, there are many different types of spirits, and the spirits kind of, can manifest in the energy dimension. And also their energy can manifest with herbs and plant in order to help or heal humans, right?
Yeah, because we have to understand that the natural world with its plants, with its stones and so forth, and all its various forms of its natural expression, these are all expressions of consciousness. These are all expressions of consciousness. And then how that manifests and affects our consciousness and our body and our spirits and so forth. And as we see in various forms of holistic medicine, including Yoruba medicine and various forms of African healing, how spirit, how consciousness manifests, and also how spirits themselves, in Tibetan medicine, they may talk about provocations, right? Provocations from various spirits or deities and whatnot, how you would diagnose that, how you recognize that, and how you treat it. And so I should also say that in many forms of African medicine, because I can't speak on all of them, but I know certainly in Yoruba medicine, divination, dafa, plays a huge role in diagnosing what's going on with the patient or the individual that's approaching you. And so we also find this in the African-American tradition of hoodoo, where you have your various tools of prognostication, but divination would essentially also be an indispensable tool of prognostication. What's really going on with this individual? And so, like you yourself have mentioned, where you have a situation with a patient and nothing has worked, right? Diet hasn't cured them. Herbs haven't cured them. Asana, aromatherapy, and so forth. Maybe none of those things have worked. Yes, it could be something going on from an astrological perspective, right? The planets could be influencing it. So then what do we do about that? It could also be karmic. So then what practices we have in place for that? And it could be a provocation from a particular spirit. And so when many other modes of therapy have not worked, as you yourself have mentioned, then we turn to mantra, right? And so mantra being one of those therapies that can be used to pacify any and all of these particular situations or circumstances or conditions that may be negatively affecting the individual. And divination can be used as a prognostication tool to find out just what kind of provocation it is. Is it astrological? Is it from a spirit? What kind of spirit? Is it a male or female spirit? Is it from the past? Is it something from heaven? Is it so on and so forth? And that can tell you what is going on, and then likewise the tools to use to remedy the situation.
Thank you so much. So I think maybe we talk another time about spirits.
Yeah.
African spirits, American spirits, and Tibetan spirits. I think we can talk about that lots, another time. But now let's go to see our topic is about Medighi, medicinal ghee. So in Soarikpa, we call it the men mar. Men is the medicine, mar is the butter. So actually it's a medicinal butter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting way, especially we produce the Myanmar, medicinal ghee in winter, because in the summer normally Of course, traditionally we don't have the containers. So in the winter it's so cold in Tibet, and we make like the butter, you know, like big pills of the butter pills. Of course, butter, the ghee is mixed with different herbs and so on. So it's a kind of used as special specific medicine in the winter because it can really enhances our digestion function. And also because in the winter in Tibet it's very cold, and you know, so our body need to burn lots of energy, and so kind of very easy to get tired and exhausted. So therefore we take this medicinal butter medicine, you know, it's kind of, it's energizing, and it's nourishing, and it give you, you know, it gives us so much energy and power. So that's why very often we use this in the winter time. But of course now it's different. We have, you know, containers, any moment, any seasons we can use it. I think any season, any moment we need it, because everybody is highly stressed, you know, right? Our hectic, the modern life, everybody's stressed, and we need this kind of butter, medicinal butter support, Medighi. And so can you tell us your experiences working with Medighi? I know you did the Soarikpa part too, so we had lots of discussions about these things, but you are mainly doing the Ayurvedic part. And can you just tell us all your experiences about Medighi, please?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I was taught how to make medicinal ghee, grita in Sanskrit, you know, going to school at the up north at the California College of Ayurveda. And so bringing that knowledge with me into my practice, into my life, but then also incorporating these herbs from these various other traditions, right? So that's why, you know, with Medighi, you'll find medicinal ghee that's made with herbs and spices from the Tibetan medical tradition, which you taught me how to make, from Chinese herbal medicine, you know, endeavoring to bring over more herbs from African traditions, the continent, from the Amazon, you know, hence the maca ghee that I make as well, right? And going back to the Chinese herbs, you know, the Romania ghee and so forth. So in other words, you know, a body, an ocean of ghee that is a reservoir for various streams of traditions and herbs and so forth, all coming together in one place. And this makes sense, especially, you know, being here in America in Los Angeles, which itself is a crossroads, you know, for various cultures and so on. And so, you know, all the stuff I make is organic and so on, which it should be, right? Because we know that organic food, or actually I could say non-organic food, and I just mean food, non-organic food, that which has been pelted with, you know, pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, and so forth, it loses 60% of its nutrients. Why? Because it has to then use its own system of immunity to fend off all the chemicals that it's being sprayed with. And so you lose that by the time it gets to you at the market. And so that's why it's imperative in general, you know, to be eating more and to having more organic foods and substances, because you are literally getting 60% more nutrients than you are from non-organic herbs and foods, right? So this is an important side note for everybody to know and to understand, you know. And then when we're talking about
But
ghee,
then you are
so
saying you
to,
are using organic butter and organic herbs, right?
yeah, it's all organic or wild crafted, all of it, organic or wild crafted. You know, all the sources it comes from are clean sources, you know, or whether I have to get like a certificate of GMP, good manufacturing practices. There has to be something that shows its purity, right? Yes. So, but then also another ingredient to medicinal ghee in general, and which is important both in Tibetan medicine and in Ayurvedic medicine, is mantra, right? Sacred speech. This is an integral, or what should be an integral part of the medicinal ghee making process, even in just making regular ghee, but the medicinal ghee making process. Mantra. What are some of those mantras? such as that for the medicine Buddha, such as that for Yutok, such as for Shenglong, such as for the goddess Chamunda, right? Coming from the Vedic tradition. Yes. So these are important aspects and components of making ghee, of medicinal ghee. And you'll find that in every single ghee that I make, right?
Yeah.
So these are important aspects.
Yeah, the ghee in Tibetan we call shunmar. Shunmar means kind of like essence of the butter or purified butter. Shunmar. Okay, that's the name of ghee. We know ghee is a Indian Sanskrit word, right? And so in Tibetan we call shunmar. Shun is kind of the essence. Mar is the butter. You know, the essence of butter. And so, can you tell us how do you make your own ghee? So I think there are two parts. First, can you tell us how you can make your own ghee? Probably you are not buying the ghee, you buy the normal butter, right? And then you make your ghee. So first, can you tell us how to make the ghee? And secondly, how you can put other ingredients in the ghee? So there's a normal ghee, how you make the ghee, that's first question. Second one is how the normal ghee can become a medicinal ghee. That's the second question.
So, you know, when it comes to regular ghee, making regular ghee is fairly simple, right? You know, you're taking butter, unsalted butter, right? You're not, excuse me, you're not taking salted butter or anything like that. That will throw off the energetics. That will, you're adding an ingredient that shouldn't be there, right? Salt. So you're taking unsalted organic butter, and also specifically you want to get it from cows that are well treated. You don't want your butter coming from cows that are terrified or in an environment where, you know, they're seeing other cows getting butchered and so forth, because that gets into their body, which then will come out in the milk, which then comes out in the butter, which will then manifest in the ghee. You don't want that. So you want cows that are well treated as possible. So let's go there first. Also, it's better to get your butter that comes from cows that are grass-fed. The color of the ghee will and can be affected by what the cow is consuming. So when we're talking about organic, obviously the grass they're consuming should be organic. And also, again, it should be grass-fed. This is to distinguish it from cows that are consuming, you know, hay or something like that. You know, another form of food that cows can eat, but does indeed affect the butter or the milk that they produce, which affects the butter, which affects the ghee. So this should be, do your background work and find out where the butter is coming from, first of all. All right, then you have the actual process of making ghee. And, you know, there is a whole breakdown to it. So, you know, I'm not able to show folks, you know, on screen right now, but to talk about it briefly, you know, it is a cooking down process. It is an alchemical process, so to speak, you know, where you are, it's called clarified butter for a reason, right? You're cooking down and purifying it, essentially. You know, you're cooking out all the bad fats, the so-called bad fats, you know, from butter. You know, that's why ghee is so much more healthier for you than butter, right? You're left with these good fats. And, you know, I've seen people bring up the issue of like, well, you know, it's a fat, it comes from butter. What about cholesterol? But actually the research shows that for some reason or another, ghee, even though it's a fat, is less likely to clog the arteries or cause anything like that. And it's actually good for heart health. It's actually promotes good heart health and also supporting the nervous system, which I'll come back around to later on. This could also be due to the fact that ghee is also a great source of vitamin A, of vitamin E, of omega-3, right? So these are factors that may contribute as to why it actually contributes to, or rather doesn't interfere with heart health, and is good for the gut. It stimulates Jatara Agni. It's good for, it's brain food, right? It's an oil, it goes right to the mind, the brain. It's also how it carries herbs, certain qualities of herbs over. So anyway, the process of making ghee, yes, is a generally simple one. And, you know, you're adding maybe a pound or 2 pounds, however much you're trying to make, you know, and you set it on a low flame and you cook it down, making sure to stir it regularly, because you want to make sure to get all the water out of it, right? And one of the ways that I utilize for making sure that all the water is cooked out of it is looking at the steam, the amount of steam coming from it, you know. And so because you want to use your sight, you know, to look at the butter as it's cooking down into ghee, you know, how much steam is there. And as the steam begins to disappear, then you know that more and more of the water is getting cooked out of it. Because if you haven't cooked all the water out of it, then you'll know, because you'll have this, you know, ring, this little layer of water at the bottom of the jar that won't go anywhere. That's how you know you haven't cooked all the water out. Also, there's various signs that you could use when it comes to whether you cook ghee down properly, right? You should be able to roll it. If it's solidified, because ghee, like coconut water, it liquefies, you know, at room temperature and hotter, it will liquefy. But also like coconut oil, it will solidify as well as things get cooler. That's why even if your ghee or medicinal ghee, especially if your medicinal ghee is in a semi-liquid state, that's natural. That's natural. If it's solid, that's natural. But if you want it to be solid, just put it in the fridge for like 15 minutes or leave it in there if you'd like, and it will just straight solidify. It'll make it harder to use, but it'll just straight solidify. So, you know, yeah, there should be some solidity, some solidity to the whole body of it. Also, when you're done cooking the ghee, when it's gotten to its final stage, you've already made sure all the steam is gone, right? You're stirring it. You want to use your olfactory senses. So we've talked about sight, but then there's also your olfactory senses, your sense of smell. And so you'll notice it go from the typical, you know, buttery aroma to a more a nutty kind of aroma. It changes distinctly. So use your olfactory senses to register that as well, going from a buttery smell to a nutty smell. And so that's another distinguishing factor. Thirdly is your sense of hearing, right? So as it begins to cook down, you'll notice it go from crackling and bubbling and very frantic or frenetic, you know, like fish egg boil across the surface. And then that too will begin to settle down, and it may become more froth. It becomes silent, in other words. So as all the water has been cooked out and it becomes just straight ghee, then you'll notice the sound subside, and then some froth may appear, speaking to the visual aspect. But as far as what you're hearing, the sound will be gone, essentially gone. And if there's anything, it's a very low kind of humming, almost like white noise. That's how you know that it's done as well. And then, you know, you pour it through, you know, a sieve or a cheesecloth, right? I like to use
taste will change it too, right? The taste will change it too, the taste.
Once you get what you're able to taste it, because it's too hot, you know, once you poured it, right? It's blazing. So you don't want to touch it. I know that it says in some texts that you should be able to put your finger into the ghee without it burning. I'm not going to suggest that you do that. Wait till it's cooled down enough before you go dipping your finger in there, right? So
what's the different taste between normal butter and ghee?
one of the differences between the taste of normal butter, which everyone is familiar, well, if you're eating butter, you should be familiar with, but when it comes to ghee, is that it's going to be, it has a more, how should I talk about it? The difference between ghee and butter, ghee, when you're tasting it, first of all, some people experience it as it being a little bit grainy. And I understand that. Sometimes it comes out like that. It can feel like there's little pieces, almost like you're eating a Hershey's bar or something, you know, in terms of texture. It can feel like that. In terms of taste, you know, it's totally, you know, it's nourishing upon taste, especially depending on what the herbs are in it. And when I say nourishing, I mean, like, even when you put it, even when it touches the tongue, you can almost feel like this kind of rejuvenation. And that's especially depending on which herbs are mixed into it. You know, it just goes right into the body so quickly. because that's how ghee works, and that's how medicinal ghee works. It goes into all 7 dhatus, meaning all 7 tissues, very quickly. And it just has a distinguished flavor compared to butter. And I can't, it's almost like trying to remember what butter tastes like because I use ghee. I only use ghee. So yeah, it's different in texture, it's different in flavor, and it's different in effect, and it's pronounced, you know, it's immediate. But then it's also long-term as well. So those are one of the other benefits of ghee, you know, over butter, is its effects.
So
how quickly
you are saying eating ghee, just the ghee itself, eating ghee is healthier than eating normal butter, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you cook
Actually,
out all the
some people
unhealthy
say it like
aspects
that
of
too.
how you
Sorry.
cook butter.
Yeah, in Tibetan medicine says eating ghee, you know, ghee enhances our digestion function, and ghee actually also very good for memory, you know, and considered one of the best anti-aging food too.
That's right. Yeah, this could also be due to its omega-3 component, the omega-3 constituent that's a part of it, right? Because of its effects on the skin, you know, and so ghee, talking about its energetics, right? Now, I know that in Tibetan medicine, like you've mentioned, ghee in and of itself is balancing for lung in Ayurveda vata, but that it can, if not potentially, aggravate tripa in Ayurveda pitta dosha. It does increase becken, which is in Ayurveda kapha dosha, which is the same in both these two traditions, because in Ayurveda, ghee is said to pacify or to balance vata, lung, and tripa, pitta dosha. It does increase kapha dosha. Whereas again, in Tibetan medicine, it balances lung, is said to aggravate or can potentially aggravate tripa, and increases becken. Now, when we go to the text, like in thinking about this or considering this difference, why? So, because I know that you said because it's an oil and so forth. And when we look at the Tantra, you know, we find in the explanatory, I'm talking about the Ambrosia Tantra now, right, in Tibetan medicine. And the Ambrosia Tantra and the explanatory Tantra, which folks should see here. This is what a version of the, a publication of the explanatory Tantra looks like.
Yeah. Translation from Dharmasala Mensika,
yeah. We find there, you know, this distinction, and I'll even, actually for everyone, I wouldn't mind reading from it. So
read it, please, read it for us.
So to speak to this particular point, add butter from a cow, goat, or zo. I don't know what zo is. What is zo, Dr.
Zomo is Zomo is the bridging the bull and female yak.
Okay. Cow, goat, or zo, male or female yak, for curing hot disorders. And aged butter from a dree. What's a dree?
Female yak.
Female
That's yak butter, yeah.
Yak butter. And aged ghee from dree or yak butter or sheep for curing cold disorders. So that particular sentence I wanted to share. Add butter from a cow, goat, or zo for curing hot disorders, and aged butter from a dree or sheep for curing cold disorders. And then of course you have other sections in here where it gets into the various hot disorders and cold disorders and the different herbs that you would use, such as drebosum, triphala, for addressing these different disorders, and often very serious disorders. You know, people shouldn't get the idea that ghee, medicinal ghee, is just for, you know, pacifying or healing, curing, you know, non-serious disorders. Ghee, medicinal ghee, is for curing very serious disorders, right? But going back to this particular excerpt, I think this also helps to point to a distinction that we can make, because as you see there from the text, certain ghee that comes from different animals can be used inherently for treating different disorders. And so thinking about how ghee in and of itself is used for pacifying vatagenic and pittagenic disorders, and it comes from cow predominantly, right? And so as we saw there in the text, ghee that comes from cows is used for treating, or can be used for treating these different disorders and such. And so I think that when we consider cow ghee and how that is more balancing for vata and hot disorders, you see? So if we think about how even in the text, ghee can be used for treating, ghee from cow can be used for treating hot disorders, I think that can also speak to it treating inherently disorders of a lung and tripa, of a lung and tripa nature. But it can increase pitta, tripa, if it comes from certain other animals. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So can you then tell us how to make this dribusum ghee? Ghee with three fruits, and the basic ghee you make, right? I think you are making, dribusum tam menmar, jesum menmar. Jesum is three fruit, menmar is medicinal ghee. Can you tell us a little bit about how to make that? How much, three fruit you put, how much butter you put, how to make them, how to mix them? Can you tell us whole the process? So
Sure.
probably in future, I will interview again, just kind of like, physically you show us how to make all these things, right? So we do these things too, in Tibetan medicine, as I told you, we do the Myanmar, like kind of a special medicine in the winter for enhancing our immune system and energizing the body, giving more strength, and so on. And also, we use this Myanmar, the ghee medicine for rejuvenation. If you want to stay young and healthy and sexy, so then we take the ghee medicine. But very often we use this Jesum Myanmar, Jesum Myanmar, three fruit Myanmar. So I know, you are making this Jesum Myanmar, and you are very good for making this Jesum Myanmar. And can you tell us, yeah, how to make a three fruit medicinal ghee?
So, to delve into it briefly, and also, I'll say that when it comes to ghee itself, the one that is considered good for vata, pitta, and kapha from an Ayurvedic perspective, and Tibetan medicine, lung, tripa, and becken, is aged ghee. Aged ghee is considered good for all three. What is aged ghee? Aged ghee, in some texts, it's ghee that's 10 years old. In other texts, it's ghee that's 100 years old. So that's a side note for everyone watching this. Now, when it comes to triphala, yes, I make a triphala ghee. And I'll also have one for a Medighi as well. There's a triphala ghee. Yes, that's it right there. And as you see, superfoods, gut harmony, body, mind, and spirit. And that gets into the qualities of the ingredients themselves. Triphala, tree, meaning three, phala, fruits. So three fruits, triphala, three fruits, trebusum, and Tibetan medicine. And so depending on how you're making it, if you're making it in the Ayurvedic tradition, you have the three fruits, amalaki, bibitaki, and harataki. In Tibetan medicine, amalaki is kirura, bibitaki is barura, and harataki is arura.
Yeah.
Yes. And so these superfoods, what we would now call superfoods, are famous. They are a hallmark, a standard of Ayurveda and Tibetan medicine, especially amalaki, kirura, and harataki, arura. And so anyway, when making medicinal ghee with them, first of all, you have to understand the ratio, right? So the standard ratio for triphala, dribusum, is 12 parts amalaki, 6 parts bibitaki, and 3 parts harataki. said differently, 12 parts Kurura, 6 parts Barura, and 3 parts Arura. Yes. And so that's the ratio for Triphala, the standard ratio. Of course, you can change it depending on the needs of the patient, you know, especially around Harataki, because Harataki itself already contains, you know, the 6 tastes, you know, because there's 6 tastes in these traditions of medicine. Amalaki has like 5 of the tastes itself, but, you know, Harataki contains all 6 of them in different parts of it, you know, like the flesh, the pulp, the skin, you know, the seeds, and so on, right? All these different. And so once you have your ratio down, right, and whether you're using the whole fruits, if you're cooking that down, because first you have to make a tea with it, right? If you're making medicinal ghee, you have to cook down the tea, and there's a ratio, you know, in some texts.
You make the decoction.
Yeah, it's a decoction, and it could be 4 times 4 times 4.
Let's say you crush the herbs and then you make decoction.
Yeah, if you're going to be breaking it down first, yeah, if you have a mortar and pestle, you know, you got to break that down. If you have powder, of course, that's different. It's already in powdered form.
Powder, okay. So you cook it.
Yeah, you have to, because if it's already in powdered form, you have to use a certain ratio. So it could be, you know, 6 teaspoons to, you know, for every, for like 2 pounds of butter, for example, or something like that. So you have to get your ratios down first. You know, in some texts, it may be, you know, 4 times, you know, however much herbs you're using, the ingredients, and then it's going to be 4 times the oil. So if you have a certain amount, if you got, you know, 2 times of the herb, then multiply that by 4. So that's going to be, you know, 8 times ghee that you'd be using, and then you multiply that by 4 as well. And that's how much water you'd be using to decoct the herbs. And so you usually are going to be decocting down, you know, speaking to Triphala itself, in a decoction, you're cooking that down to, you know, typically depending on the strength you're looking for, it could be 1/4 the amount that you started with of the decoction, right, down to 1/4, or you're cooking it down to 1/8, and so on. In the Tibetan medical tradition, one way of doing it is through a kind of infusion, where you're not cooking down the herbs in a water decoction. You're actually making an infusion of the ghee itself, and then adding the herbs to that. And then you're doing an infusion. So not a decoction of the herbs, but an infusion of the ghee in the herbs itself. And then you're letting that sit for a certain period of days, 3 to 7 typically, depending on how many ingredients are in it, or whether the herbs are whether the powdered herbs are soft or whether they're coarse. This helps to determine. So without getting into all those details, you're basically making a decoction of the herbs first. You're cooking that down, and then you're adding that decoction to the ghee, because you've made your ghee now. You cook the butter down into ghee, and then now you're combining the two, and then you cook that down, and that is the infusion process of the properties of the roots and herbs, whatever you've been working with, into the ghee itself. And so then that takes its own period of time, because like you did with the butter into the ghee, you're cooking off all the water, right? You have this decoction made with water. And so now you have to cook out all the water, just as you did with the butter into the ghee. So those sights and sounds and, you know, the smells that you apply to making ghee, you will also apply to the medicinal ghee that you're making. You want to make sure all the steam is gone. You're looking at the surface of the ghee itself, and as it's transforming and changing, you're listening to it, the sound, you know, of the boiling, and as that changes, and you will notice, you'll hear the pitch actually change from one to another as it goes. You will literally hear the pitch change, going from one particular higher pitch to a lower pitch as it shifts and becomes medicinal ghee. So, you know, in brief, you know, that is, you know, the process, to give you an overview of the process of making medicinal ghee in general. And so, of course, you have to be conscious of the different ingredients you're using, you know, whether it be Triphala or whether it be, you know, cut and sifted, you know, bulk roots and herbs, and also other such, something like Romania and things like that. The person who's making it should be conscious of that. And also the essential oil content. This too is extremely important because you have some herbs. What happens when the ingredient you're using has the majority of its medicinal or active constituents in the essential oils, right? We know that, when using such a one as like cinnamon bark, for example, right? When you're adding that to a decoction, that should be added at the end, the final 3-5 minutes of the formula. Why? Because you don't want to cook off all the essential oils, wherein which is so many of its medicinal and healing properties, right? So likewise, it would do well to consider such a thing when making medicinal ghee as well. So these are some particular components or aspects of making medicinal ghee, if not with triphala. And
So yeah, this I think the way you are told is Ayurvedic way of making ghee, so lots of cooking and boiling. So
yeah,
that's why like you don't kind of boil out or cook out the essential oils or the how do you say the substances which contains by these substances, because in Tibetan I think it's simpler. We if you have the powder, so directly you add the powder into the ghee itself and then you cook a little bit. You already made the ghee, you cook a little bit and then you let it solidify it, but then you see the powder is down there and then you mix it again.
yeah,
So,
that's a variant because you find in Tibetan medicine, because so much, of, Tibetan medicine, comes from Ayurveda, right? And so you'll find in texts by like um,
Tibetan medicine
Kongtrul
is
Rinpoche.
Tibetan medicine is influenced by Ayurveda.
hmm Yeah, so you'll find like you look at some of the instructions of, Tibetan masters of healing and medicine, and how they break down making medicinal ghee. And you find similar processes, right? Different ingredients because it's a different land, but you'll find some similar processes. So because in the text, you'll also find, milk is added to the ghee making process. So milk is added to it and then it's cooked down. Or maybe you add more water and then it's cooked down. And depending on the needs of the patient or what you're making, if you need to balance more tripa, right? Or pitta dosha, maybe you're adding some sugar to the ghee, right?
And
So
do you add honey? Because in Tibetan medicine, we use this honey powder. We dry the honey, we cook the honey and then dry it, and then at the end powdered it and then mixed with ghee. So that's why Tibetan members normally when you eat they're very sweet, because they add lots of honey inside.
yeah, you can add honey to it. That's going to help to balance out, Becken, kapha dosha,
Mhm.
right? So if you want to add more of something that's going to help balance that out, yeah, you add honey to your ghee, right? You add it in a particular ratio, but honey can be added to it. Likewise sugar and so forth. So these other literally additives can be added to the ghee depending on what the needs are for the patient, or if you're making something that's a little bit more generalized to address a particular condition that you're putting out there. Yeah. So milk, honey, sugar, things like that, you'll find added to the process. Even triphala ghee, triphala ghee, in the classic text has a bunch of other herbs added to it as well. So, but triphala ghee, in and of itself is renowned for how well it works on like vision, helping vision and dealing with vision disorders and so forth.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the ghee. Ghee has omega-3 and it's very beneficial for the brain and nervous system. And do you make any specific ghee for relaxation, like anti-anxiety?
Yeah, the Brahmi ghee that I make, which
Mm.
is one of the most popular ones that people buy, the
Uh, that,
Brahmi ghee.
that's ghee with what?
It's made with the plant Brahmi, Brahmi,
Mhm.
HMI. And Brahmi is considered a food of the yogis and yoginis. Why? Because it stimulates the Sahasrara chakra and the Brahma aperture. So for those that want to go, that are looking for plant knowledge, plant wisdom, and so on, that can support their meditation practice. Brahmi is a fantastic herb for that because of how it stimulates said chakras, including the ajna, I would say. So that's something that will support people's meditation practice, and likewise also help to alleviate anxiety and, you know, those kinds of frustrations that come along with it. You know, it can literally, just the way it affects your brain chemistry, right? Because we have to remember that ghee and medicinal ghee, it is carrying the properties of the roots and herbs that it's mixed with. It helps them to cross the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is there for a reason. But when we're talking about individuals, especially with certain disorders, dementia, you know, Alzheimer's and so forth, when you're able to make a medicinal ghee that is infused with a particular plant or herb that would otherwise have a more difficult time crossing the blood-brain barrier to help that individual, when you can have a medicinal ghee that's infused with that, then it helps to bring those medicinal qualities right to where it's needed to then further accelerate the healing process for that individual. And so we find that in Brahmi and other such herbs that affect the brain, that affect the mind. You know, the lion's mane ghee that I make, which I make ghees with medicinal mushrooms. So all that kind of stuff is really potent and effective and useful.
Do you make ghee with cannabis?
I have.
Probably it's a secret. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't get into that process today.
Okay. So my question is, do you have like a ghee lab or factory, or do you make it at home?
There is, I mean, I make the butter. I make the medicinal, I make the medicinal ghee, but the butter I get is from sources that, you know, I've looked at where it's, you know, they're organic, you know, it's grass fed, you know, and stuff like that. So, you know, obviously you want to make it in a clean environment. And, you know, like I said, you have the mantra element and so forth, but yeah, I don't have a farm, not as of yet. So I have to source my butter that I turn into ghee, you know, from places that, you know, where it's organic, the cows are treated well and things like that. And also the herbs where I get my plants and herbs come from farms where it is, again,
Yes,
either
yes, I got that. Yes, yes.
wild crafted and so on.
Yeah, we got that. So you have really like organic butter and organic herbs, but are you making the Medighi at home in your kitchen, or you have a laboratory, or you have a factory?
I don't have a factory yet, especially with what's been going on with COVID and so on. So, you know, I'm still, you know, looking for a place where I can make it in like a commercial kitchen or something like that. So I'm still working on a larger space, you know, where I
now
can
you
make
are making at home, right?
Yeah, now I make it, you know, from here and, you know, just in the best environment then I can make it in.
Okay. All right. So can you give us one very easy and simple ghee like recipe? I know many people, you know, you talked so good about ghee. I'm sure many people are interested to want to try out ghee, you know, at their home. And can you give us a kind of very, you know, simple recipe, home recipe?
Yeah, sure. So a simple one that folks could make using fresh herbs, right? Or using fresh spices, because you can make medicinal ghee. When I say medicinal, you know, one should understand this to include spices, herbs, superfoods, and so forth, at least if we're talking about Medighi. And one that individuals can make is one such as with garlic, garlic ghee. And so if someone wanted to make a garlic ghee, which would be warming, right? Because garlic is hot. It's hot in potency. And, you know, garlic is used for, you know, cardiovascular issues and circulation and so forth. And it's also an aphrodisiac. It's very stimulating, right? Stimulating to the system, stimulates the Agni, the digestive fire. So if you have low or poor digestion, low or poor digestive fire, you know, garlic is great for that. And there's also the 3 stimulating spices that I make, which is made with ginger, turmeric, and galangal. But as far as something simple that people can make, you can make some garlic ghee. And
okay, sorry, 3 stimulating substances. You use the ginger.
And this is some garlic. This is the garlic ghee that I made last night. You can see that it's in a semi-solid state,
Yeah.
right? And if I wanted to solidify this, I could just put it in a cool space or in the refrigerator, right? Just threw a label on there. And so a simple way that folks can make that.
Yeah,
sorry?
how much ghee, how much that ghee do you take per day?
Yeah, so if folks wanted to make this, what you could do is you're going to, so this is going to be different than the general way you make medicinal ghee. With fresh herbs, you're going to actually infuse it while the butter is turning into ghee. All right, while the butter is becoming ghee. So you take, like how I made this, take 1 pound of unsalted butter, organic unsalted butter, chop it up into 1/4 inch pieces, and you add that to your pot, okay? And you know, it could be like a stainless steel pot or, you know, a general pot or something like that. I prefer not to use pots that have that dark bottom because, excuse me, it could be harder to see. One of the visual cues you want to use for when butter becomes ghee is that you should be able to see through to the bottom because it's clarified butter, right? It's clear. You should be able to see through to the bottom of the pot when it becomes ghee. So that's why I would prefer you not to use a dark one. At least that's why I prefer not to use a dark one. Anyway, so you have your 1 pound of butter and you've chopped it up, you put it into the pot. As it's melting, you can take a whole clove of garlic and mash it up in a mortar and pestle. If you have a mortar and pestle, you know, you want to mash it up. Obviously take, you know, all this stuff off of it, you know, so that you just have the pieces there. Put it into your mortar and pestle and break it up, you know, release the aroma, smash it up, right? And this will yield maybe about like 1/2 cup's worth or so, but just take the whole clove of it and take that ingredient once you've mashed it all up, and you can either, you know, scoop it out and put it into a measuring cup that you'd like, you know, if you want to separate it, if you don't want to pour it from your mortar, depending on how large the mortar is that you're using. If you don't have a mortar and pestle, then I would suggest, you know, slicing it into as thin slices as you can, right? So if you don't have a mortar and pestle and you just have a knife and a cutting board, then try and slice it into as thin slices as you can. And then you would take all of that garlic and you pour that into the melting butter, right? So now you're taking the garlic and you're pouring it into the butter that is melting. And so as the butter begins to melt more and more, you're stirring it. If you have your mantra, you're reciting that as you're doing it. You're reciting the mantra as you're cutting the butter, as you're mashing up the garlic as well. The mantra, you're starting with this. And then so as it begins to melt, you're stirring it. You're stirring it just as you would when you're making ghee. Okay. And then so as the butter becomes ghee, and it should be done, if you're cooking it on a middling flame, it should be done in about 25 minutes. Some forms of butter, it may be done in 15 minutes, but you're looking at an average of about, you know, 20, 25 minutes for it to get done. So if you were to include time as a factor, you wanted to keep an eye on the timer, yeah, it should be done in about 20, 25 minutes. And you don't have to stand there stirring the whole time because you're letting it melt, but you do want to come back periodically to stir it. This again helps to release the water from the butter to help facilitate it becoming ghee, to facilitate the ghee making process. This also helps obviously for it to, for the garlic to infuse into the butter itself. And you'll notice this potent aroma that arises in your kitchen, you know, from the pot that will fill your whole home with this lovely, delicious aroma as you're cooking down this garlic, right? And so 20, 25 minutes pass, By then, you know, the butter should have become ghee, right? It's clear. Maybe froth is arising. You'll notice milk solids around the ring of the pot, right? From the separation, you know, of the stuff from the butter into the ghee. The notice, you'll notice the aroma as well. Now, of course, you're not just making ghee, so you can't just expect there to be this nutty aroma, right? If you were just making ghee, but you will notice the aroma of the garlic. And I'm telling you, what it'll basically smell like is pizza. It smells like you're cooking pizza. It's delicious,
It
and I
seems,
like pizza, so
yeah, it
it's
seems
great.
you love pizza. Yeah, I can tell that.
So if you love pizza, if you like pizza, try some of this garlic ghee. It smells lovely. You'll recognize it immediately. And then so yeah, you know, but what you will notice again is the visual factor. Besides some of the froth rising, you'll be, as you stir it and you've continued to stir, you'll be able to see through to the bottom of the pot. Ah, now we know we're at the final stage. And then so once you're done and the ghee is done, right? Because you're not basing it on the garlic, you're basing it on the butter becoming ghee. Once the ghee is ready, the garlic is ready. And then so you pour that through, you know, a sieve, as I mentioned earlier, you know, cheesecloth, and pour that into your jar. And you should be left with this. And you'll notice even some of the layer of solidity of this spiced ghee itself. You notice that, you know, you have a lot more solid mass here, and it's a little bit more of a liquid state here. If it was not cooked properly, what you might find is this liquid layer at the bottom sitting here. That's how you know it hasn't been cooked. All the water hasn't been cooked out. There will be this layer of what looks like water just kind of floating around here. Even if it's solid, even when it's solid, it's just swirling around there. So, and if you want to double check, put it in the fridge. Put it in the fridge for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, let it solidify. And if you find that liquid swirling around at the bottom, that's how you know you didn't cook all the water out.
Okay. So can you show us how to take it? 1 teaspoon and then hot water, or just 1 teaspoon, that's it? Or can you just show us how to take that butter?
Demonstrate.
Medighi, yeah, demonstrate, please.
I mean, if anyone wants to, you could just go grab, you know, a little spoon or something like that and dip it right in.
Well,
but I
yeah,
can excuse myself to go find an eating utensil to demonstrate for everyone. Would everyone like to see that? Is that
so you normally take 1 teaspoon, right?
Yeah, you can take 1 teaspoon and teaspoon or half a teaspoon, especially if you're eating it straight. Half a teaspoon is fine if you're eating it just straight out the jar, which you can do, because that's one of the things that's so great about medicinal ghee. You know, you're not having to consume capsules. You're not having to deal with tablets. You know, you're not having to consume tinctures, you know, made with alcohol, especially if you have something going on with alcohol. It's ghee. So you can just eat it straight out of the jar, or you can cook with it, as I did last night. You know, it smells so good. It's like, I might as well have some pizza. And I just dipped into some of it and threw it on the food that I was cooking, you know what I mean, that I'd already done with. So yeah, you know, you can take it and use it as a dressing on your salad, on your meal, whatever you cook. Some of the other herbal ghee, such as the ones that I make, you know, with the maca ghee, you know, the 3 stimulating spices, add it to your chai, add it to your smoothie. You know, this is a great way of getting medicinal ghee, herbal ghee into your system. You know, it's wonderful. So
somehow you are saying you take Medighi as a medicine, or you take as a food, right? So
it's Medighi is food as medicine. Medighi is food as medicine. Yeah. Yeah, soups, exactly. Soups is a great way of utilizing it. You know, baking, you know, if you wanted to make a cake, you know, imagine making cake with maca ghee or brahmi ghee. If you're making it with something like brahmi or trifle or something like that, now you're making like a focused, you know, it has a focus now, you know, because if it's made with something like maca or goji berry or garlic, you know, it's a food, it's a spice, so you get all those benefits, and it's very wide ranging, you know, and what it brings to the body and how you're able to enjoy it. If it's something like a brahmi ghee, or like a lion's mane ghee or something like that, now you're talking about brain food. Like now, whatever you're making is going to have an emphasis upon brain health or cognitive health or the nervous system, you know, which is another great thing that's great about ghee and medicinal ghee, you know, in this time. Going back to something you brought up earlier, you know, as terms of what it does for like the nervous system.
Yeah, this photo, what we see, is that your photo?
Yes.
So, okay, then there is a kind of rice dish and you add the ghee into the rice dish. And also you can add into cappuccino. Wow.
Yeah, people love, I've been told by customers that they love mixing it. Some folks mix it, those who drink it, who drink coffee, like mixing it with their coffee. And I don't drink coffee, so I never thought of it.
So instead of, yeah, you're adding the cream or milk in the coffee, you add the ghee in the coffee, right?
Yeah, and it makes this lovely layer of like this lovely golden layer. At least when I mix it, like I like mixing my Romania ghee with hot chocolate, and it's delicious. It's delicious, and it feels great. So, but it makes this nice golden layer, you know, at the top of the brew.
So when you
And
add,
people should also understand, those listening and watching this,
yeah,
should also understand that ghee and medicinal ghee is really, it's imperative that we have something more like this at this time, because we are surrounded by electronic devices, electronics, and you know, metal structures and all this kind of stuff. What is that? That's vata dosha. All these frequencies and electromagnetic frequencies, rays, and so on. All the metal that's surrounded by, as a result, you know, from structures and industry and so on. All this is vata dosha, you know, cold, metal, you know, all these things, radiation. All this is related to vata dosha. All this is related to lung, and hence can create more vata, more lung in the body, in the mind. And ghee in and of itself, because it's an animal, it comes from an animal fat or animal oil and so on, that helps to inherently soothe and coat the nervous system in and of itself. Then you add herbs onto that and it becomes even more potent. So this is very important for us at this time, because ghee, and furthermore medicinal ghee, can help to balance out lung, vata dosha,
yeah,
in a way that is pronounced. When we see how lung and vata in our nervous system, in our mind, can be so much more so negatively impacted by all the radio frequency and all the electromagnetic frequencies, energy, and all of the aspects of metallic elements, electronics, in other words, that we're surrounded by, that can increase that dosha. And ghee and medicinal ghee can help to balance that out. So we really need that in this particular time and moving forward in human history.
great. Okay, now my last question. My last question, yes, as you said, the ghee is from butter, and butter is from milk, and milk is from animals. And then today there are more and more, there are more vegans, you know, so many vegans that they don't want to eat any animal products. So in this case, they can't eat ghee or they can't eat butter because it's from animals, right? So do you have any kind of special Medighi for vegans?
Yeah, if there was a ghee for vegans, it wouldn't be ghee, right? Because ghee is made with, comes from butter, which comes from an animal. So if it's not coming from, if it's not of animal origins, then it's not ghee. So for vegans, two ways that they could kind of navigate that is, one, using ghee, medicinal ghee, for its spiritual or external uses, spiritually, i.e. in fire puja, right? Ghee is paramount, you know, in fire puja, in goma ceremony, and so forth. And so you can use ghee in those ways for generating auspiciousness and for generating and attracting various material, spiritual boons, cities, and so forth for yourself and others. So that's one way vegans can utilize ghee or medicinal ghee externally, is in and for its spiritual practices. Now, secondly, would be if they wanted to mix, if they wanted to create something with coconut oil, for example, right? Now, again, this wouldn't be ghee, because ghee comes from butter, but if they wanted to try and utilize coconut oil in such a way and mixing herbs into that, totally different process than making medicinal ghee. But that is a way in which I would invite individuals who are vegan to infuse or to mix in herbs with a particular oil. Mm-hmm. Are you muted? You're muted, Dr. Nida.
Sorry. So you can make like coconut ghee or coconut oil medicine for the vegans, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to try that, it's not the same process, like I said, as ghee, because with ghee, you are cooking it down and you're infusing it into the butter.
Yeah, that's an
butter become ghee. But with coconut oil, that's something that I would have to look at, and which I have looked at, but it's a different process, making coconut oil, for example. I imagine it would basically just be something similar, because you're not cooking it down. You would be mixing it into something. And when you're making medicinal ghee, you're not just mixing it into something. There's a cooking process that's involved. If you just have some ghee and you toss some herbs into it, that's not medicinal ghee. That's not cooking down medicinal ghee. That's just ghee with herbs thrown into it, mixed into it. But likewise, that's where I would see the process being similar for something like coconut oil, because otherwise you would have to find a way of cooking that down and infusing it with the herbs, as opposed to something like, an infusion process that we find in medicine, in Tibetan medicine, where you might end up with something like this, right? This was a Tibetan version of astragalus that I made, and look at all the herb that's in there. Look at that. So that's an example of a ghee, a medicinal ghee made according to the Tibetan medical tradition, or at least that particular style.
Yeah. So do you? Okay, I said already my last question, but do you know that in any African tradition, do they have like a medicinal butter or medicinal milk, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find in, at least what I've come across thus far, in East Africa, they make ghee there as well. So I've seen it used in, I think it was Ethiopian, possibly also Sudan or Sudanese cuisine in cooking. They use ghee. They have ghee there as well. So I find that very interesting. And, yes, you will find ghee in Africa. And what I've come across thus far, again, I've seen it being used in East African countries. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, yes.
Yeah, we know all the benefits of ghee. It's wonderful to take it every day, but then there have to be a kind of special dosage, right? If you overdose it, if you take too much, so it can be harmful too.
Anything can be harmful in too great of amount. Anything can be harmful in too great an amount, and that's no different for ghee. And so, and keeping in mind that it's a fat, right? So if you have a diet where you want to consume less fat or other forms of fat, ghee would be the substitute for that. So, on my labels for my products, you'll see, like half a teaspoon, right? Anticipating that people will use more. So really you don't need to go above like 2 teaspoons a day of ghee or medicinal ghee, right? There may be exceptions for certain conditions, but you really don't need to go above 2 a day. 1 is fine, right? 1 teaspoon, 1 is fine. You'll feel it, but 2 a day really is all you need. And if you're consuming ghee or medicinal ghee, that means you don't need as much fat from other sources as well. Yeah. So that's something to be kept in mind. And also, you know, those that already have excess kapha going on in their bodies, right? They should be conscious of, you know, the consumption of ghee, because if you already have too
All right.
much kapha dosha going on, then you don't need to be throwing too much more on top of it, you know.
Yeah, great. Thank you so
Does
much.
anyone have any questions from the
Thank you
audience?
so
Are there any questions?
do they have, you can check actually in the chat.
Yeah, Laura or anyone,
No,
is there
there are no
anything?
questions.
Okay, there are no questions. That's good. Then we can finish it soon. But I think, yeah, your explanation is really, really clear, you know. So,
Actually,
yeah.
just can vegans try shell helix?
There's a
So,
question for you.
oh yeah, it was some question. So, but yeah, you're welcome regarding talking about electronics. Yeah, that is very important for us to understand at this time. You know, we are surrounded, if you live in the city, you're surrounded and inundated with electromagnetic frequencies and electronics. And we should understand that ghee and medicinal ghee is something that could be of significant importance in helping us remain balanced or regain balance, living in such environments and conditions.
Yeah, Laura, can you share William's homepage? So I'm sure, you know, because of your speech, many people are interested in your Medighi. So how they can find you?
Yeah, for anyone that's
What is your
interested
homepage?
and would like some themselves, you can go to medighee.com, MEDIGHEE.com. I think Laura's about to share it as well.
Is Laura sharing?
I don't see anything.
So medighe.com, right? Your homepage. Okay, here you go, medighe.com. Wow, it's a beautiful homepage. So it's very easy. Okay, Medighi, and shop now. Wow, great.
Yeah, and then you have the products, energetics, and I talk about, you'll find that on the labels, energetics, because that's something that I learned about in studying holistic medicine, you know, the energetics of the plants and ingredients that you're using. And so you see the different families there: earth, water, fire, wind, space.
Yeah, 5 elements. Oh, great. So you have a wonderful homepage. So then it's very easy to find you, right? Medighe.com. It's very easy.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
that can Europeans order too, from Europe, or only in US?
Yeah, I ship to Europe. I've shipped to Germany. I've shipped to Canada. Yeah. So, and if anyone has questions about the shipping and handling, just email me. Just email me at jackson@medighee.com, ACKSON@Medighi, or send a message here and it'll go right to me and I'll get it.
You're personally answering the emails.
Yeah, I respond to them.
Yeah, great. Okay, perfect.
And these are the different forms of payment, and I take international is accepted as well. So yeah, everyone, no matter where you're at, you can get some Medighi.
But also, if they have any questions about your Medighi or in general Myanmar, they can ask you directly, yeah?
Yeah, anyone can hit me with your questions. You can go to the .com, you can go to Instagram as well, you know, Instagram.com/Medighi. You can find me there. You can go to Facebook, same thing, just type in Medighi and you'll find me.
Cool, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Nida, for having me.
Yeah,
and
it's
thank
really
you everyone
great
here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no further questions, though I do see one regarding the spirits from Chiara. So yeah, maybe that's something that we can get into next time as well.
In future we'll talk more about other stuffs. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you Sorokang, Italy. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, our translators. We have Italian, Spanish, and Russian translation here. And yeah, especially thank you, William Jackson. Today, you are my special guest. Thank you so much.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Nida. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, right? Thank you for the work that you're doing as well with Sorokang and the tradition of the Utop intake. And, it's a pleasure being here and an honor and sharing in this information. And thank you to all the translators, and thank you to those who have shown up to this discussion today. I hope that you all have learned more about ghee and medicinal ghee and how you can incorporate it to your life to support your well-being and in your path towards liberation.
Yeah, and happiness. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.